Let me now get into the program itself and our speaker today, Dr. Malik Fernando. I don't think needs much introduction. Dr. Malik Fernando, in addition to everything else, is a past president of the WNPS and still continues over the decades to be engaged with us. Dr. Malik is very much a part of our marine subcommittee at the moment. He's a scientific advisor, he's a mentor, he's everything that we can be to this marine subcommittee and also to the WNPS itself. I really can't do justice to his profile here, but let me tell you, he's a conchologist, he's a doctor of medicine, conchologist, diver, I think one of the few divers who has really gone free dived in Mount Lavinia and all around Sri Lanka over the years. So he's seen the changes and that's why he's talking to you today. And you know, we're going to make a chronicle of this, make a journal of this so that we will have this preserved for generations to come, because we really need to ensure that beaches and spots like this, not just beaches, places like this are valued. The value of it is actually treasured, and the generations to come do know the value of it. So Dr. Malik also is a diver, he's a conchologist, he's a scientist, and the list goes on. So there's no one better to talk to you on the Mount Lavinia beach. And what we're really doing now is the WNPS Marine Committee is doing a study of the Mount Lavinia rocky shore together with some university students to really look at the changes that have happened over the years, over the decades, and over some of the events that have happened in the recent past, because Dr. Malik has seen this over decades and we're really recording it. So this will be a part of a scientific study, will be accessible soon, and this is the first of a series of talks that the WNPS will embark on to carve out this picture and these facts of this beautiful little area that I think is one of the most special corners in the world, unquestionably, and quite undervalued. I think we really need to ensure that that happens. So without further ado, the Mount Lavinia Rocky Shore by Dr. Malik Fernando. Please, I'm sure the next hour is going to be very enthralling. Handing over the program to you now, Doc. And raise your hands at the end of the show. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of the talk. And looking forward to an engaging discussion. Dr. Malik Fernando, over to you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you very much for that introduction. Yes, it is nice to be here today to talk about a place that I have been visiting over many, many years, from my childhood, I think, yes, because that's where we used to go for our Sunday morning swims from a long time ago. So on the right, you see the area that we're going to talk about. That's the Mount Lavinia Hotel out on this promontory. And to the north is an area of rocks. And this is what we call the rocky shore of Mount Lavinia and the beach that is up here. To the south of the hotel is a much larger beach, which is what used by the hotel guests, and that has not been visited or explored by me or any of my colleagues, as far as I know. This beach has built up because of the longshore current, the northerly longshore current that prevails, which washes up sand against this obstruction, and also causes the excavation north of this. So that's the area we are going to talk about, and a little bit about what's deeper from the shore right up to the reef, the line of breakers that you see out there. So I'll go a little bit about why the Mount Lavinia Bay rocky shore, what we have studied previously, recent changes that have been brought about by humans to this bit of beach, and what has been the effect on the changes that have been made by natural forces, and what do we hope to learn by this study. So that's the view taken some years ago in August. So the sea is rough because the southwest monsoon is there. You can see the rocky outcrops that we are interested in. That's the promontory, and that's the little bit of rock going out. All these rocks get washed by waves. Waves bring in larvae of various animals and plants, and access to these rocks is fairly easy. So, what's the reason the major anthropogenic change to the site, and is there any lasting damage? So what we are talking about is what happened in 2020, where there was a beach nourishment program by the Coast Conservation Department that filled this area of the beach with sand going right out far. We are not going to get involved in the pros and cons of this program, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. Should it have been done or should it not have been done? That is not what we're interested in. We are more interested in how the area is responding to that. This is a historic spot familiar to many. And the rocks, as I said, are easily accessible. And this has been used as an outdoor laboratory by students of schools and universities for many years, particularly during low tide, particularly during the calm period. It's easy to get to the rocks, at least the shoreward side of the rocks. Now, we also have the results of a previous study that we can use to compare what is there now. So these are the reasons why we chose the Mount Lavinia rocky shore. In addition to our long interest in this, there is also something else which I will talk about in the meantime. So the previous study was during the years 92 to 95. It was a joint study by the Sri Lanka Sub-Aqua Club, of which I'm a member, and the St. Thomas's College Sub-Aqua Club, which was formed by members of the Sri Lanka Sub-Aqua Club. So we got together and did this study during this period with boys from the school as well as the divers from the club. We started by mapping the rocky shore. I'll show a full picture of this later. We mapped all these, including this rock outside, away from the shore. We did many weekends of observation of biodiversity on the shore, like that. And this was mainly during the monsoons, where the rocks are subject to the waves, and that brings on the life forms there. During the calm period, we went out to sea and we dived on the reef, what we call the first reef, the line of breakers that you see from the shore. And we study portions of that. I will talk about that later on. The biodiversity on the shore was what was growing resident on these rocks, as well as what got washed up, including jellyfish. So during the monsoon, jellyfish get washed up on the beach, but unfortunately, following the El Nino event of the global, the ocean warming event, most of these jellyfish stopped coming ashore, probably because the raised temperature killed off the larvae wherever they were. So we don't see many jellyfish now. So what's the study area? The study area is a rocky shore, which is Hotel Bay. The hotel is up here. And that's what we call the pavilion point. We call it the pavilion point because before the new buildings of the hotel were put up, the bathing pavilion was here. And as kids, we used to get to the beach through the bathing pavilion. And that is no more. So the rocks have all been named. Many of the names were what the local residents and fishermen used. Some of them we invented ourselves. This is Lavinia Gully. It's called Lavinia Gully because terns roost on that. That has not been part of our study, except that Dr. Jagat Gunawardhan, who also accompanies us, has spent the days photographing and observing the birds, that the terns that roost on that rock. But I'm not going to talk about that. So during the monsoon, the rocks are washed by waves. But during the calm period, these are generally dry. But there were some forms of life that continued even during the calm period. This lovely photograph taken by Malik Fernando in 2020 gives a good view of one of the bays. The Hotel Bay is further to the left, but it shows the rocky outcrops there. Now, photographs taken in June of 2020 after the beach nourishment. This is sometime after the beach nourishment when some of the sand had already washed away, but it shows the amount of sand that has come up. You see the depth to which sand has been piled up on the beach. And even up here, these rocks that were there were all buried. And with the passage of time, nature took over and started removing the sand. There's still a bit of sand there, but these rocks have now been exposed with the sand being washed away. You have an idea of the amount of the volume of sand that has been put on this beach. All these, the white spots there are oysters. We should have a closer look at these oysters in a moment. Now, you might wonder where did all this sand come from? This is a map drawn by Dr. Jayawardena, my diver colleague, showing the various reefs and some of the shipwrecks out of the Colombo beach. That's David Mount Lavinia is there, Morito is there, and this is where the treasure was observed. We don't have a definite idea, a definite location for that, but this is what was observed from the shore. So that's where the sand came from, and this caused us some concern because the extraction of the sand is very close to one of the reefs that are here and some of the shipwrecks that are here. So this has also been a cause for concern for those of us who have been diving on these reefs and rocks. Now, what really got me interested was a photograph that was sent to me by one of my colleagues. And during the period when the early 2020, when the sand was piled up. A photograph taken by one of his friends living in Mount Lavinia showed these thousands and thousands and thousands of shells that had been brought in with the dredged sand and deposited on the beach. I made a plea for some of these shells to see what they are, and this is part of the collection that was eventually sent to me. These are all scallops of the one genus, Mt Lavinia. We have found a few of these very small ones washed upon the beach over the years, but these obviously come from much deeper off the shore. But what really got me excited was this species of scallop, Decatopecten, which I had previously only seen from sites in Mandativu, one of the Jaffna Islands. And it was interesting that these also occur off the western coastline as far south as Colombo. Another shell that I hadn't seen, Callisto chinensis, also came up. These are shells that have been reported by Parakumakita Singh in his book on seashells of Ceylon in 1978, but which I had not seen during my shallower dives or washed upon the beach. So the Marine Committee decided to have a look at what's going on the rocks and try to see what had been affected by being buried by sand, and how the rocks, if they had been damaged, how they would have recovered. The first visit was on 21st of February, and this is a photograph that we took there. It showed the effects of the natural forces at work, where the beach is now receding. All this would have been covered by sand to that level. Beach is receding, and the people are back there on the beach. And this is something which the authorities should know. They talk about expanding the beach to enable tourists to come and enjoy the beach. The beach has been there for a long, long time, and lots of people have been visiting the beach and enjoying the beach. Looking the other way towards the hotel, there are people in the water, there are people fishing, and there are people with fishing rods and inflated tubes walking down the beach. Now, this was a site that I was familiar with, but my colleagues who were on the trip didn't know what. These are floating fishermen. There are fishermen who cast their lines and their rods from these rocks up here, but there are others who sit on these tubes, go out into deeper water, and do their fishing from there, away from the rocks. And in the past, I have come across these fellows quite far out to sea, fishing for skates, fishing for stingrays and eagle rays. Well, I don't know whether the eagle rays actually are bottom feeders, but anyway, certainly the stingrays are. And in Sinhala, they are called madua. And madu fishermen were quite common out in the bay, sitting on their tubes. The rocks have been exposed, and we see a familiar band of red algae and the white spots of the oysters that are a part of this show. So what do we hope to learn from this current study? First, have there been any adverse effects brought to the biodiversity by the sand nourishment? And if there has been any damage, are the effects permanent? And how will life return? Those are the three points that we are particularly interested in. So on the first visit in February, one of the first things that we noticed on the rocks was that there were only dead oysters on the rocks. These are only the lower valves of the oysters. These oysters were there, dead and alive, right through the year from earlier observations that we know. But these seem to have been all smothered by the sand. That is what a live oyster would look like, with the upper valve covering it. Upper valve, lower valve. And that's the underside. The oyster is attached by the whole of the undervalve. They're very firmly attached to the rock. They're very difficult to remove without damage. So something that I'm interested in is how long will it take for these oysters to return, if they're going to return. We looked at the this black band closer up and found that they were this red alga, Rattalupia lithophylla. This is a very common seaweed that we have seen over the years on the beach. They occur above the high tide line so that they dry out at times. The rocks also showed limpets. So life is coming back. It has been coming back. Now, this is the red alga, as I said. It looks brown, but in water, after a few hours particularly, it shows as green. Even the red alga has chlorophyll, the green pigment, which is usually masked by red pigments, and that's why it looks brown. Sometimes it's quite red as well. Now, we have only been able to do 3 visits there in February, March, and April, when the COVID lockdown affected us. So what I propose to do now is to discuss the algae, the crustacea, prawns, crabs, and so on, the shells, the mollusks, and worms that we have observed over the years, not only this year, but in previous years as well. So starting off with the green and the red algae, we haven't seen any brown algae this year so far. That's what we've already seen. And if you look closely, you can see some brownish fuzzy areas there. So on closer looking, we see that these fuzzy areas are in fact an epiphytic red alga that's growing on the Rattalupia. These are some old micrographs that shows what these look like when enlarged, and that's a drawing. So these are algae that we have known to be in this area for many years, but I have not been able to positively identify them down to species level because I haven't had access to the original literature. So this particular green alga was the first to come back. We saw this in February as well, on rocks that face the sea that get wetted by waves. So these require a bit of drying out and sunlight for them to grow. Higher up on the rocks was another alga. Now this one, close look, very fine hair-like strands, and if you look through a lens, you find that they are in fact tubular. They're tubular, and they are very floppy. They don't stand up on their own. Whereas this one, Pantanina, looks rather similar, but rather than hanging down, they stick up. They are stiff. Each one is made up of cylindrical cells joined end to end, like joint on a finger, very wiry, and they stick up. And they are usually seen quite high up, where they just get a bit of water now and again. A very common weed there in that area is Alga fasciata, which we haven't seen as yet. And this was taken some years ago, a long ribbon like green strands. Now, what of the algae that are yet to be seen? These are things that we have recorded in previous years that we're keeping a lookout for. Calliphora vagabunda requires more water than the other two green species. They're usually found in tide pools and gullies where there's a lot of water flowing. You see like the joint of a finger, cylindrical cell joined end to end, but these are branching. So the genus Calliphora has branching thallus. The brown alga that is quite common there, that has been quite common there, low down, where it gets a lot of water, usually in tide pools where water collects, or where in gullies where there's frequent flow of water with the waves, is Pedina Tetrastromatica. There are many species of this in the country. This is the one that's commonly seen at Mount Lavinia. The red alga, Vacillating corticata, grows profusely on the red alga belt, but we haven't seen any there. Blue-green algae are now considered bacteria and not algae, and they are more correctly referred to as not as algae, but as a bacteria. There is a rock there on Mount Lavinia on which I have on about 3 occasions, 3 years spread apart, have found growths of this blue-green cyanophyta. It requires microscopy to see them clearly and to identify them because they're very, very thin and have a very characteristic appearance. Now getting on to the crustacea, we start with the crabs. We have been seeing crabs. This is a crab that was found on the sand underneath a rock and was caught by one of the students who were with us. This is I call it a swift-footed crab that was photographed by Maxime. This lives on the rocks, washed by waves, and they run around the rocks very rapidly. These belong to a group that are called talon crabs. Talon crabs because the walking feet end in sharp, thorn-like spines, talons. That enables them to cling on to these slippery rocks and move very fast. It's a matter of interest. You talk a little bit about other crabs that can be seen around. These are ghost crabs. We have seen ghost crabs as well. They are back again on the beach. They live in burrows in the sand, and they come up and they run around. They're very difficult to get close up to. Notice their eyes, vertical. and they have practically all-round vision. So they're very difficult to get up to. Even walking up behind them, they will see you and they will run away. Some other types of crabs that are around in the water. That's the rock, the swift-footed crab, the one that runs on the rocks. Short claws in front because it picks algae and other small animals, I expect, from the surface of the rocks where it feeds. The reef crabs are larger, heavier, very slow moving. They live under rocks and big, heavy claws with which they can crush gastropods, snails, and bivalves. They're feeding. These have flattened legs. They are able to swim very short distances by flapping them, but these are used mostly for digging into the sand. Now that is a swimming crab. All 4 pairs of legs are flattened, and they are able to swim quite well by flapping these up and down. Spider crabs, slow moving, live under rocks, and they camouflage themselves. They use these long claws to pick algae and bits of sponge from the rock and plant them on their carapace so that they blend in beautifully with the environment in which they are. They don't move about much, but they can use their claws to pick up things, bits of food from around. Hermit crabs don't have shells of their own like this, but they borrow gastropod shells. We have seen a few of these around. Now these are hermit crabs. Hermit crabs live in the water and on the shore. So they either require to be completely immersed or they walk about on land, but they're close to the water so that they keep themselves wet. Now that one's got into a garden snail shell and is climbing up a coconut tree. You know, these are the roots of a coconut tree. That's the hermit crab that we picked up running on the beach. They live in burrows in the sand, and they leave characteristic trails on the sand. The feet make small ones, and the shell makes the wide gap. They're an interesting group, but I have not been able to study them, and I don't know whether anybody else has in Sri Lanka. But there are many, many species on land and in the water, on the shore, not so much the land, the shore and the water. And one species, which is very colorful, is protected under the Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance. Now, a big surprise was when Maxime found a lobster. Now, that should not have been there. Some of the younger ones waded out into the water and examined the shoreward side of the rocks. And there are shells that have come back. These are top shells, and that's a rock shell. And this lobster. Now, lobsters live in deeper water. The nearest lobster site to this stream is on the shoreward side of the pavilion point, right on the promontory. On the shoreward side, quite shallow, 10, 15 feet. There are lots of long rocky ledges, and these lobsters live under these ledges. How we came onto this beach, I don't know, I suspect that there have been people going out at night catching these lobsters, and this one must have escaped coming to shore. Now, the lobsters that we have in this country are really called spiny lobsters of the genus Periwinkles. They don't have large claws, but they have these very long antennae. The European lobster of the genus Humarus have enormous claws like those of crabs. This is one of my catches when I was diving in the UK. So the lobster looks quite different. And interestingly, there are spiny lobsters in the UK waters as well, quite deep. Our spiny lobsters occur in shallow water. In the UK, we have to dive down to 120 feet to catch spiny lobsters there. These fellows taste very much better than these. So, question, how did this come here? There's no answer, really. Now, barnacles are crustaceans. They are related to prawns and lobsters. So how, you might ask, could this be related to a prawn or a lobster? The larva settles on the rock, and the plates of the that cover the crab or the lobster or the prawn form in a different way and forms a barnacle. So this species we have found over the years. It's very common. They're very small, so that's a 5 centimeter scale line. And they have been very quick in coming back to this shore. The chances are that they were killed by being buried in the sand, or I have no proof to say that. But there are lots of them that are back. Now, barnacles are either acorn barnacles or goose barnacles. So the acorn barnacles is what we saw on the previous slide, and that's a larger one. These grow up to nearly 3 inches tall, and they're found underwater. That's not so much on the shore. All these barnacles have 6 to 8 plates around the side. Sometimes the plates are vertical, and the animal is quite large. These are, in some countries, these are eaten, by the way. Various types of barnacles are consumed. This was in the Beticular Lagoon. See, on an oyster, these barnacles have settled. You settle on bits of wood on the shore, even on mangrove roots. I am not aware of anybody studying barnacles in Sri Lanka. It would be a very interesting area, I'm sure, for somebody to study, because there are so many of them of interesting shapes and sizes. Now, this we found in Mount Lavinia under a rock. Very unusual form of thing. So these are acorn barnacles. Now, what are goose barnacles? Goose barnacles are stalk barnacles. They're attached by a stalk to the hard surface. These settle on floating logs in ships' bottoms, and they get washed up on the beach on bits of wood, on plastic bottles, slippers, and so on. Now, if you are able to come across one of these on the beach and they have not been there very long. They're probably still alive. You put them in a polythene bag or a bottle of water and look at them. You will see the animals coming out and waving their limbs in their search for oxygen. They breathe using water flows that they generate with the appendages. But going back to acorn barnacles, not all of them live on the outside of objects. Some genera live within coral. And as the coral grows, so does the barnacle enlarge. So this is the hole that gave access to water flow to the barnacle that's inside here. Now that's another species that is on the coral itself. You can see the plates. But these fellows are actually within the barnacle, within the coral. Others are even more adventurous, and they live inside sponges. And this is one of this genus, the Casta, that is adapted for living inside sponges. This was a dried up sponge that was washed up on the beach somewhere on the east coast or the south coast. And breaking open the sponges reveals this. In March, we noticed a pink band on the bottom of the, on a rock underneath the algae band. And one of the youngsters got a bit out of it and brought it up to me, and I found that these were segmented worm tubes. This is the specimen enlarged. Each of these houses a worm, and these tubes are built by the worms gluing grains of sand round and round and round. And you see this is a side view. The tubes slope up like that. And these have been quite common in this area. They belong to the genus Sedentary. Now, Sedentary also belongs to the group of sedentary worms, worms that stay in one place. And these are some of the others that we can see. This is a photograph taken by Malik Fernando, who's a dive operator in Negambo. A recent photograph a few months ago, Christmas tree worms. Again, very difficult to observe closely because they have light sensors, and if you get too close, they withdraw into their tubes that are buried inside coral. Then they usually, the tubes are inside coral. Common tube worms that we see of on the reef are these Bellastarter species. They were very commonly seen in the marine aquaria. But some years ago, they were put on the protected list. So there are more of them that are now seen in the water, and you don't see them in the hotel aquaria like we used to. They have membranous tubes, very popular for the aquarium trade because the membranous tubes are stuck to the rock, and they can be easily removed without damaging the tube and the worm. So they were also pretty hardy. This is an unusual worm that's found in deeper water. This is a colony of very, very fine white tubes with red-colored worms living inside. So from a distance, this looks pink, but as you get closer, the worms sense the approach of somebody or something, and they withdraw into the tube, and it becomes a light pink, and then if you get really close, it gets dead white. So those are some of the sedentary worms. There are many other sizes and many other species of various sizes around. Now, what are the errant worms? Errant worms are those that walk about like this Urito, it's a bristle worm. It looks like a caterpillar, where a Battaya type of caterpillar with these bristles that can get into your fingers and be a bit of a nuisance. Not very common, but I was very lucky to find that in Vellavata. I'll get on to the mollusks, snails, and the clams. These two we have found already in water at the foot of the rocks and on the seaward side. One of these, this one, we have also seen, but these belong to a group of transients. Transients because we see them on the rocks, but then they disappear. So these shells, these snails are really residents of estuaries and mangroves. And I feel that they come onto Mount Lavinia beach being washed up on floating vegetation, because they're there one day and they're not there again, and these keep coming up over and over again. So that one I have seen only on one occasion, sometime in 1981, and never since. So now in March we found rather more life on the rocks. So limpet shells. There are lots of limpet shells. These fellows that look like little flat cones, they're just above the high tide line. So they don't like to be submerged much, but they want to be wetted periodically. So during the daytime, they're quite stationary, but during the night, they walk about and they feed on the algae, and then they come back to the very same places that they occupied. So, something that I have not done, but it would be interesting is to keep photographing one colony day after day to see that, to see whether they move around or whether they are still in the same place. The periwinkles are found above the high tide line. Above the high tide line, again, they would be moving about and feeding during the tide when they're washed by spray and the surrounding rocks get wet. Underneath the tube worm colony that we broke off, I found some bivalves. You can see this little brown thing here, which is Brachydontis variabilis, which we have seen in this area previously. So they are also in the neighborhood. They have also come back. Now, looking very closely at this area in this photograph, enlarging the photograph, I found this. It looks like a worm, but it is in fact what's called a chiton. It belongs to the mollusk group, but is covered by 9 plates on top, and it's open underneath. This again we have seen previously. So this is something to look out for in very wet areas with a lot of weed growth around. That's something that we will have to look more closely, because I don't know much about chitons. The common the brown mussel has also been seen there amongst weeds. We have not seen it this year. That's a closer up view of the Brachydontes. In shape, they look very similar, but the genus Brachydontes has a characteristic line of ridges inside. So again, identification requires a bit of high-powered lens and looking inside. Some of the other shells that are there and have been there and are possibly there, the false limpets. There is one species that I have observed over many years in a rock pool on top of one of those rocks there. Unfortunately, I am now unable to reach that, that particular spot. And I haven't been able to get anyone to, I haven't been able to teach anyone what these fellows look like to send them up to watch, but that is something that we will be doing in the coming months when we have access to the beach once again. These are the common, the limpets that come up there, which we have already seen. Celana rota, these fellows. Metalloida striata are these fellows. And Clipedina notata, they belong to a different family altogether. So they are common residents of that area, which we would expect to see. Similarly, the periwinkles, the common one that we have seen Littoraria undulata, they have come back there. We will expect to see the this one, the Nodilittorina pyramidalis, and the Echinolittorina biangulata, which is this one. They're not very common, but they do come. This is a rare one on Mount Lavinia. I've only seen one or two over many years, but they're very common on the rocky shore in Gaul. That's Tangerine and New Zealand. This is something that I found very interesting, which we haven't seen yet. Coffee bean snails. Coffee bean snails were found in this area under this rubber plant tree, in the rocks here. We have not found it yet, which may be because they are buried in the sand over the dry period. I have noticed that I have got the impression over years past that during the dry season, the calm season, when this area is dry, they have disappeared underground. And once the waves start coming in, they come. Now, the usual habitat of coffee bean snails are mangrove swamps. These are some on the floor of a mangrove in Kalpitia. These are the ones that we found in Mount Lavinia. This is a photograph taken in 1992. So we will be looking out for these. Two species. These are two different species. The Melampus silonicus, which is probably endemic to Sri Lanka. I haven't seen records in the internet of these being found anywhere else. In fact, it took me many, many years to be able to identify this positively as Melampus silonicus. I found it described in a very old bit of literature. They have very even teeth on the lip, whereas the other one, Melampus satiatus, have a different arrangement of the teeth, and they're also different in shape. These fellows are nicely, smoothly rounded, whereas these fellows have definite shoulders, strangulation there. So Chironicus I have found in Mount Lavinia and also in Montgomery area in a small mangroves there. Fasciators I have found on either side, both sides, the east and the west coast shore of the Putram Lagoon, on the Kalpitiya side and on the Vanathamillu side. So these are, they're quite separated, they're quite distinct. And the question is, are they still present? We have to wait till the rain, till the monsoon sets in, and we are able to go there and have a look. Some odd things that we came across on the beach was some reef animals, Rotoria triangularis, on the beach alive. And this is one of the species of pearl oysters, which would have been from the reef. How it came onto the beach there in Mount Lavinia, I have no idea. So what have we learned so far? Have there been any adverse effects? Yes. The dead oysters, I think, indicates that animals that live on the rocks have been smothered and killed. But are the effects permanent? Obviously no, because we have seen a lot of life coming back. So this is very encouraging. They've been coming back quite rapidly. So what more do we have to do? For instance, what is the state of the first reef? There's a lot of concern about the sand nourishment, and also now after the recent disaster, what has happened to the reef? Have the reefs been destroyed? Well, we have to wait until we can get into the water and go back there. We have some reef profile that we did in the 92-95 period. It was Mount Lavinia Hotel, north of Bellangala, and in the middle, Hotel Seaweed. I don't know whether Hotel Seaweed still exists, but the GPS locations I have on record. So we should be able to get back onto this survey. And it'll be interesting if we can persuade our diving colleagues to go out there onto these same areas and take a photographic record of the reef right down from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have to say. I can take questions now. This photograph is one of my favorite photographs taken through a microscope. It shows the female, the oogonium, the female reproductive part of a red algae, spewing out the larvae of the eggs, as it were. I hope you have any questions I can take now.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. Before I get on, I'd like to open the house for questions, but something that's popped into mind and very relevant, I thought I'll share at this stage. Let me quote from Jane Goodall. If we understand, only if we understand, we will care. Only if we care, we will help. Only if we help, we shall be saved. I really hope we understand and understood the complex and very sensitive biodiversity that exists in this little part of the ocean and in the ocean. I only hope we will care. I know we'll help, and I know that we'll help, and life will be saved. And with that, may I leave the house open for questions? I'm sure there are many for Dr. Malik. Thank you so much, Doctor. And yeah, please raise hands. You can come in on the chat box, or you can come in raise a question. think we've lost sound.
No questions have come through yet.
Did you hear me? Did we lose audio for a while? Do you want
No, Graham, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, Doc Malik, yeah. Okay, can I start with the question so that the rest of the folks on the program on the show can probably give it a little more thought. Doc Malik, we did see some. You showed us the fisherman with the tube, but there was some other fishing activity, and that also was there. We saw octopus. We saw a whole lot of other activity, fishing activity. Would you like to give us your observations and comments on that?
Yeah, where there was the casual fishermen with rods from the rocks, fishing from the rocks, and also there's the floating people. But we also saw the beach scene operators, the Mardel operators back. But we noticed that they were now not using the old vallam that they traditionally used for beach scenes, but using outboard motor-powered fiberglass boats for their fishing activities. So that was interesting. There are no other fishing activities there, except there may be illegal lobster collectors. I say illegal because some years ago, the Mount Lavinia, the Colombo Stretch was declared a no-go area, no collecting area for lobsters. I say this because of that lobster that we found on the rocks. And knowing that there are lobsters that there have been, I haven't been there in recent years, but an ideal lobster habitat at the end of the pavilion point. So it could be that youngsters have been going out and collecting lobsters there. They do this at night. The lobsters come out to feed at night, and they're out in the open. They're rather difficult to get when they're in their caves under the ledges.
And that speared octopus we saw, Doc, that we observed. How is that regular?
Yes, that was interesting. I don't know how they caught the octopus. Often they use a hand spear to get the octopus. Yeah. So
this was an octopus that we saw an individual carrying on his shoulder, as it were, and it had been speared. An interesting part of the whole ecosystem, which I thought I'll leave with Doctor to comment on. Okay, Doc, I'm seeing some questions now. Okay, here we go. I think there are a few. One, you mentioned teeth on the coffee bean snail. How do these work, Doc?
Yeah, these are raised ridges. These are ridges on the on either side of the opening, which helps to narrow the opening to prevent crabs, particularly crabs, from putting their claws in to get the soft parts out. So the teeth are, I don't know how they developed and what their origins are, but the practical effect of the teeth is to narrow the opening to prevent predators from being able to reach inside to get the soft tissue out.
Okay. And oysters, are they still to be seen during the season? No? Another one that's coming up in the chat box?
Well, if by the season you mean the calm period, yes, we have seen them there.
Okay. Yeah, Doc. There's one, a whole lot of coming up. So let me just try and group these together. So certain species during a period which they're supposed to be allowed to breed and grow. Is there anything law or regulation in our country to cover the same? Example, lobsters who are being harvested for commercial reasons. Anything you can comment on that? I guess that would
Not
be
as far as I know.
Yeah.
Not as far as I know.
Okay. Okay. Okay, interesting question, but let me put all those together. Are periwinkles blue in color in particular, or are they varied though?
There are a number of species of periwinkles. They are not blue in color. Some of them have a little bit of a blue tint on them, but they vary in their color. They vary in their pattern. The different species have different patterns, but they are by and large brown, white, yellows, and some of them are pink and red, but they can vary. They're not all blue.
Okay. Okay, there's Mr. Tuan Jamion just asking you. He said, I used to swim to the rich outcrop about 300 meters away. Any updates on Lavinia Gullah? He just wants to know. So interestingly, from an anecdotal point of view.
Well, Lavinia Gullah is full of Lavinias at the moment. Dr. Jacob is the one who should be able to answer that because he's been photographing.
Yeah, yeah. I can tell you that there were a whole lot of greater crested, lesser crested, and little terns, particularly greater crested and lesser crested terns out there. Yeah. Interestingly, a question. The port city over the last few years, there's been development on that side, on further north. Has there been any visible impact on the Mount Lavinia Bay as per se is one question though.
Well, I don't know whether port city has had an effect. I don't know.
Correct. Okay. 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 Any more? Yeah, okay. So let me just try and put it in these put this in a little more friendly format. I'm not seeing many other questions on the chat. Is there anything that you'd like to?
Yeah. Well, there is a. Well, I've opened the chat box.
Yes.
And there is a question here from Ravi Randenia. How do you think WNPS?
Yes.
How do you think WNPS should get the new generation of youth to get them to protect?
Yes, I did see that.
Rich in marine life.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's a good question. We have already got a number of young people from one of the university colleges joining us to come on the beach study with us, and that is a start. That is one way. What more we can do? I don't know.
Yeah, we've got a team of university students who readily volunteered, and some other conservation organizations as well. So there is a lot of interest in this one.
Now, there's a question from Zainab. Why do why do coffee bean snails have teeth in their shells? It's not only coffee bean snails. Most of the snail-like mollusks have teeth to some extent. Some very big, some hardly noticeable. Now, Professor Suki Ekaratna, I'm very glad to see that Suki has listened to this. Interest in marine bio seems to have dwindled. Any comments? Well, yes, Suki. Now, it was Professor Suki Ekaratna who was largely instrumental in getting us to do the survey in 92, 91, 92, 95. And Suki was also largely responsible for getting the microscope for me to use. And that is how I've been able to take those photographs of the seaweed. Some of them I showed you, some micro photographs, and those were taken by the microscope from the MBIOD project of 92, 95. And there was also a photograph of Suki there in one of the slides I showed you. So yes, Suki, interest in marine bio seems to have dwindled. Well, I don't know whether they have dwindled. There was generally very little interest in it. And I'm also rather discouraged by the fact that the amongst our diving fraternity in the Sub-Aqua Club, there is very little interest or practically nothing regarding the marine biodiversity. And those who have been interested are now doing their own thing in various other research things. So Suki, yes, I agree with you, Suki. It is sad, and sadly, well, I won't say anything more, but yes, your point is taken. It is sad.
Doc, okay, there's another one. A couple of Doc. Interestingly, before I forget, there's one that's come up. The configuration of rocks. How did the nomenclature? How was it identified? Give us a little bit of the history of that, Doc. That's very fascinating.
Well, some of the rocks were named by some of the names were those given to us by the local population, the fishermen that came across there. Others, we coined those names, like Catty, for instance, because it's a collection of lumps, Catty. And Darren's rock is, Darren was one of the youngsters from St. Thomas's College. Well, I found him doing something a bit odd, I think, on that rock, and I called it Darren's rock. So then Pavilion rock is because the pavilion, the bathing pavilion was there. The rocks on the embankment are named Lovers' Rocks because in those days, on Sunday morning or Saturday morning or evening, it was dotted with couples hiding under umbrellas. So that became Lovers' Rocks. Dinggala because it's a long, shallow rock. So that's how that happened.
So that was yourself and a couple of other divers who really named those rocks? Was it?
Well, the group that did the Marine Biodiversity project. As I said, Professor Suki Ekaratta was also involved, but it was mainly done by one of our former members, Srilal Pereira and Gihan Jayatilaka. And there were a number who are no longer in the diving community, unfortunately. And a few of them have come up and now are in the Sub-Aqua Club, like Johan Havesekara, who's the current president of the Sub-Aqua Club. Yes, they were all there. So there was a group of us there. It's not just me alone.
Okay, I see questions now again filling up into the chat box. So I'll take you from where we left off. And is it said that the sand was moving on the beach? We'll move northwards to nourish other beaches. She wants to know, is this likely to happen? How do you feel where the sand will migrate to?
Well, we know that sand moves with the currents and the waves. I can't answer this question. Is this likely to happen? It is possible. So it was said that this was put there in order to get the sand to move up there. But I don't know. I wouldn't like to say anything.
Okay, fine. Again, the question of what are the recommendations for good community projects in coastal areas, particularly for those living in coastal areas. I'm just clubbing a couple of questions together, Doc. I know would you like to just give the audience an overview of what can be done, even outside in the areas that they live in?
Offhand, one that comes to my mind is garbage.
Yep.
We spend a lot of time, and in fact, it become one of the in thing to do beach clearing projects with a lot of publicity. Nobody talks about telling the community, don't drop things that you have finished with, put it in your pocket or in a bag and take it back home or someplace and put it into a garbage bin. But then the question arises, where do we find garbage bins? And the next question is, how are the garbage bins cleared? But this is an area that I think needs a lot of thought and concern. The local bodies should have good garbage collection and disposal facilities so that there should be good garbage bins around for communal use. And then it makes a practical point of tell people, take your garbage back with you. Don't just drop it on the road. Don't just drop it on the beach. A lot of what washes up on beaches, the plastic and the bags and the old shoes and slippers and things, has come down the waterways, down the drains, down the waterways, into the sea, down the canals, into the sea, and then they wash up on the beach. And we know that plastic bags can get tangled around coral and other things, and of course they affect the animals that are there. That is something I think practical that can be done by groups of people. That can be community-based conservation.
Yeah. Interestingly, flowing from that, Doc, I'm just again one from Dr. Kumarika and Randhania. I think interestingly, the question of interest levels in marine conservation and marine diversity obviously trails way behind the more visible and tangible terrestrial conservation and obviously and life, biodiversity. In your opinion, how do we think we can engage youth and the future generations to look at conserving and being interested in marine biodiversity? So how can we really spark that interest? And to partly answer that question, I think this program, this whole study on the Mount Lavinia Bay was with the intent of doing that, so that we really get the generations out there to study, to appreciate, and to engage and to look at these habitats and these areas with a much wider scope in terms of, as I said, and to care about it and to get closer to it in terms of understanding how complex the ecosystem is. But nonetheless, answering that question, I'm sure you would see much further than that. And what are your views on that?
Yes, Graham. Let me start by answering this question from Jehan Piris. Could we do another survey? Yes, Jehan, definitely. I put this idea to the Sabakpa Club some time ago, and I would like the Sabakpa Club to get involved in doing another survey on at least on the four transects that we did in 92, 95. Following those reef contours. Now, we started the Sabakpa Club in 1986 with the idea of encouraging people to go underwater to see the life that is underwater. And we taught people free. And we did the same thing with the St. Thomas's Sabakpa Club. We taught the young people there about the sea. They were taught scuba diving, and some of them were taken out. And that program still goes on in that college. Now, getting young people or anyone interested in marine biodiversity, if they are unable to go down in the water and see what is there, it becomes very difficult. It's not practical to sit in your office and have things brought to you and then call yourself a marine biologist. You should be able to go into the water. So we have set the baseline, the foundation for people to be interested in going on in studying marine biodiversity and being interested. The Sabakpa Club does not do any diver training at the moment because there are plenty of commercial dive centers around. And there are, in fact, many, many people who are now able to dive. Unfortunately, the principal interest seems to be going on to shipwrecks and seeing how many large fish they can see, counting the number of dives they have done and talking about it, and also how deep they have gone. The interest in the biodiversity is poor. How that can be corrected, I don't know. One way is by talking about what is there, showing pictures, which is what I'm doing, and also making available what I have done for other people. There was a question that did come up with somebody asking about doing field work and I think identifying shells. Yeah, well, this is something that, that I have done in the past. I have done programs under the Biodiversity Secretariat to talking about identifying shells. And the results of my shell study is now available on my website with identifying keys as well. So
correct. Fantastic. Yes, Doc, because anyway, interestingly, we've got a great team led by young scientist Medisha Gunawardana from Horizon University, who's leading that team, working with us. Do feel free, any youth interested in joining us, do feel free to come and join us on this fantastic project. And interestingly and encouragingly, the response has been really great. So I think this is one way to start. But as Doctor said, engage, understand more, read up. And if anyone who wants to get into deeper water, so much the better. So much the better. Also, before I close, and I think, unfortunately, I hope I've taken all questions, but time is catching up. It's a busy morning for everyone. The WNPS is involved with a citizen science project in studying, obviously in collaboration with MIPA and DWC and NARA and Biodiversity Secretariat in a ground study to model particle dispersion, NERDLs. It's a very simple process. Do contact the office on a number which the WNPS office, or get us on the website, message us, or on Facebook, inbox us, and we'll direct you to how you can engage in this project further, provided, of course, you stick to your health guidelines and observe travel regulations. It involves just a study in your backyard, as it were. So if interested, just inbox us and we'll give you further details on how to proceed. In the meantime, I think we've covered most of it. Time is running out. We've had a very, very engaging session. Thank you, Dr. Malik. Thank you to our sponsor, Kumarika Hair Oil, who's been with us and is going to be with us on these chats. Big thank you to them. Also for everyone who helped put this data together, team that worked out there and who will continue working out there, Medisha and his team. Looking forward to an update, probably in a couple of months, maybe 3 to 4 months, maybe. And we'll keep you posted. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Malik, thank you again. Good day, and enjoy the rest of the programs that you'll probably be sitting on right through the weekend beginning today. Good morning, and signing out. Thank you.